A toast to the loser. We're done. He mocked me in front of his wealthy friends on my birthday, and I simply slid my small gift across the table. I said calmly, "Go ahead, explain to your sisters why their college funds are gone. To your parents, why their home and luxury cars will be seized in a matter of minutes, and to your business partners, why the firm is dead before the check arrives." I rose from my chair, and the panic started to ripple through the room. What kind of man serves his wife divorce papers at her own birthday party? That's what my mother had asked me 2 weeks earlier when I'd called her, crying over the humiliation I knew was coming. But she was asking the wrong thing. The real question was, what kind of woman spends half a year meticulously plotting to tear down everything her husband holds dear, all while playing the part of the devoted, oblivious wife he took for granted? The answer to that question was me, sitting at the far end of the long table at Cipriani's, watching Ethan perform for his crowd of sycophants. My hand was resting on the single envelope that would answer both of those questions in the precise way he deserved. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For you to understand how I ended up in that moment, you need to see the perfect illusion I had been propping up for years. That morning, exactly 2 weeks after my mother's phone call, I was up at 5:30 a.m., just like every other morning for the past 8 years. Ethan was asleep on his side of our enormous king-sized bed, turned away from me. The distance between us felt more like a continent than a few feet of mattress. I looked at his back for a second, a flicker of a memory of when he used to wrap his arms around me in those quiet minutes before the day truly began. Now, he clung to the very edge of the bed as if my touch might be contagious. Our house in Beacon Hill was dead silent as I walked to the kitchen. 5 bedrooms, 4.5 baths, and a garage with 3 cars. All the shiny symbols of success Ethan needed the world to see. The granite countertops were cool against my hands as I started his coffee with the precision of a chemist. A special blend from a boutique roaster in the North End, ground for exactly 15 seconds. Not a second more, not a second less. Water heated to precisely 195 degrees Fahrenheit. I had learned the hard way that any deviation from perfection would earn me that particular look of his, the one that screamed I was a disappointment yet again. While the coffee brewed, I laid out his breakfast on the porcelain china his mother had gifted us for our 5th anniversary. An egg white omelet with organic kale, no salt. A single slice of artisan sourdough toast with exactly 1 teaspoon of avocado, spread evenly from crust to crust. Freshly squeezed grapefruit juice in a crystal glass that had to be placed exactly 2 inches from the edge of the plate. These were the kinds of details that could look like love, unless you knew they were really the terms of an unwritten contract, one where my worth was measured by how flawlessly I performed these tasks. Ethan came down at 6:45 on the dot, his internal schedule as rigid as every other part of his life. His custom-tailored Brioni suit hung on his frame perfectly, and his Wharton alumni ring glinted in the morning light. He sat down at the kitchen island without even a glance in my direction, his attention immediately captured by his phone. "The investor pitch is at 10, he announced, not looking up. "I need you there by 9:45 to get the conference room ready." "Of course," I answered, my voice carefully neutral, a tone I had perfected over the years. "I've already organized the presentation decks. What I left unsaid was that I had also spent 3 hours the night before, fine-tuning the very algorithm that made his impressive returns a reality. The Oracle engine was my life's work, the child of my MIT doctorate in computational finance, brought to life through countless sleepless nights of coding and debugging. But in Ethan's version of our life, I was just the woman who handed out folders and poured the coffee while he took credit for my genius in rooms full of men who only pretended to understand it. 3 hours later, I was standing in Apex Dynamics' gleaming glass conference room, placing leather-bound portfolios at each chair as Ethan fiddled with the presentation remote. 20 investors were about to arrive, men with more wealth than vision, all of them counting on Ethan to make them even richer. They would never suspect that the complex mathematical models he was about to present, the groundbreaking predictive analytics that consistently outperformed the market by 14%, came from my brain, not his. "Remember," Ethan said, adjusting his tie in the reflection of the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Boston Harbor. "If anyone asks, you're providing administrative support. We can't confuse the narrative." The narrative, that's all our marriage was anymore. A carefully crafted story where Ethan Sterling was the brilliant financial prodigy who built Apex Dynamics from the ground up, and I was the lucky woman who married well. Never mind that I had personally written every single line of code that powered our trading platform. Never mind that I had poured years of my life into developing algorithms that could predict micro movements in the market with an almost supernatural accuracy. The investors began to file in, shaking Ethan's hand with the kind of reverence usually reserved for a prophet. I served coffee from a silver carafe, as invisible as a piece of furniture, while Ethan launched into his speech. He explained the latest updates to the Oracle engine with the confidence of a man who actually understood his own words, though I knew he had just memorized the talking points I'd written for him, like an actor learning his lines. "The neural network analyzes approximately 15,000 data points per second," he said, clicking to a slide I had designed at 2 a.m. "Our proprietary machine learning model adapts in real time to market volatility." One of the investors, a man named Morrison with sharp, intelligent eyes, raised his hand. "How does the algorithm account for asymmetrical trading patterns during post-market sessions?" Ethan's smile didn't falter, but I saw it. The microsecond of pure panic in his eyes before he deflected. "An excellent question. Let's bookmark that for our technical deep dive next quarter. Now, about those returns." I stood by the coffee station, my hands perfectly still, fighting the overwhelming urge to step forward and answer the question myself. The algorithm used a hybrid model, blending pattern recognition with anomaly detection specifically calibrated for low-volume trading. I could have explained it in 30 seconds. Instead, I refilled water glasses and kept my mouth shut. That evening, we drove to his parents' house in Weston for our obligatory weekly family dinner. The Sterling estate was a sprawling 3-acre property of manicured lawns and old-world architecture, the kind of place that screamed old money, even though Ethan's father had made his fortune in commercial real estate just 2 decades ago. Eleanor Sterling greeted us at the front door, giving Ethan a kiss on each cheek while barely registering my presence. "Maya, dear," she said, the dear landing with the warmth of an ice cube. "You can leave the wine in the kitchen." The dining room was set for 8. Ethan's sisters, Chloe and Olivia, were already there with their boyfriends, a pair of law students from pedigreed families. The conversation swirled around me, never including me. It was a torrent of talk about ski chalets in Aspen and investment strategies that assumed I had nothing of value to add. "Chloe's engagement party is next month," Eleanor announced over the roasted lamb. "The country club, of course. Senator Whitman's son deserves the very best." "How wonderful," I said. "Can I help with any of the—" Robert Sterling Sr. cut me off with a hearty laugh. "Maya, sweetheart, you just worry about keeping my son happy. Let the women who know about these things handle the party, the women who know about these things." As if I hadn't been secretly managing their investment portfolios for the last 2 years, generating the returns that paid for this entire lavish lifestyle. They had no idea that their trusted financial advisor, the one Robert Sr. loved to brag about at his golf club, was just forwarding all of their requests to me for the actual analysis and strategy. Later that night, I lay awake, his father's dismissive laughter echoing in my head while Ethan snored beside me. The clock on the nightstand read 3:47 a.m. I finally gave up on sleep, went downstairs, and made myself a cup of chamomile tea. In the darkness, the kitchen felt different, less like a stage for my wifely duties and more like a space where I could actually breathe. I sat at the island with my laptop, planning to review some code, But I found myself scrolling through pictures of my mother on social media instead. She had posted about her book club, a photo of her and her friends in a modest living room in Ohio, and they all looked so genuinely happy in a way I couldn't even remember feeling. The next morning brought another performance, but this time something inside me had shifted. Ethan was in his usual spot at the breakfast bar, glued to his phone as I set down his perfectly arranged plate. I'd been thinking about my mom's upcoming surgery, how she'd be laid up for weeks. "I need to go to Ohio next week," I said, pouring his coffee. "Mom's hip replacement is on Thursday." Ethan didn't even look up from his screen. That woman is still renting an apartment? At her age, it's embarrassing. That woman. Not my mother, not the woman who raised me by herself after my father died, just that woman. I felt my jaw clench, and I set the coffee pot down a little harder than I meant to. "She's having major surgery, Ethan. She needs someone to be there. Then wire her money for a private nurse. We can't have you running off to Ohio right now. The Goldman Sachs presentation is in 2 weeks." He waved his hand dismissively, his eyes still locked on his phone. Then, something on the screen made him smile. A real smile, not the practiced one he used on clients. His thumb moved quickly, typing a reply to whatever, or whoever, had sparked that genuine joy I hadn't seen him direct at me in years. When he caught me watching, he quickly deleted whatever he was writing and put his phone face down on the counter. "Actually, I should head in early today," he said, pushing his half-eaten breakfast away. "Daniel Lawson is coming by to talk about some technical restructuring." Daniel Lawson. The name set off a small alarm bell in my head, but Ethan was already halfway up the stairs to get his briefcase. I heard the garage door open and close, leaving me alone with his cold eggs and a growing knot of dread about that deleted message and that sudden, secret smile. 3 days later, I was in our home office running the quarterly backup of Apex Dynamics' entire system. Ethan insisted on keeping personal copies of everything, paranoid about server failures or cyber attacks. The external hard drives whirred as terabytes of data copied over. I usually use this time to scan the code for bugs or potential optimizations. But this time, a folder name caught my eye. Restructuring_confidential_Q3. My finger hesitated over the mouse before I clicked. Inside were documents from 3 weeks ago that made my blood turn to ice. There was a draft of a press release announcing Daniel Lawson as Apex Dynamics' new Chief Technology Officer. Not a consultant, not an advisor. CTO, my role. The role that should have been mine if I had ever been acknowledged at all. The new organizational chart showed Ethan at the very top, with Daniel directly beneath him, and 3 of his old Wharton buddies filling out the rest of the executive team. My name was nowhere to be found, not even in a footnote. But the last document was the worst. It was a memo titled Operational Efficiency Initiative, and it detailed plans for streamlining operations by eliminating redundant positions. Redundant. After 8 years of building every single technical system that made Apex Dynamics function, I was being classified as redundant. At the very bottom, in Ethan's unmistakable handwriting, was a small note. Implement after Q2 personal matter resolved. A personal matter. Is that what I was to him? My hands were shaking as I copied the entire folder to a hidden partition on my personal laptop. The backup progress bar continued its slow crawl across the screen, while I just sat there, absorbing the cold, hard fact that my own erasure had been planned, documented, and scheduled like any other corporate transaction. 2 days later, I needed to get out of the house. I decided to grab lunch at a small cafe near the Apex office building. I rarely went out to eat by myself, but the walls of our house were starting to feel like they were closing in on me. The cafe was packed with the usual financial district lunch crowd. I just ordered a salad when Jessica, Ethan's secretary, walked in with another woman I didn't recognize. They sat in the booth directly behind me, so close I could smell Jessica's cloying perfume. I took out my phone and pretended to be reading an article, but I had actually hit the record button on my voice memo app. So the birthday surprise at Cipriani's is all set, Jessica said, her voice buzzing with the excitement of someone sharing a juicy secret. 40 guests, private room, the whole 9 yards. Whose birthday? Her friend asked. The wife's. But that's not what it's really about. Ethan's finally ready to make the change he's been planning for months. You know, to handle the situation we've all been waiting for. They both laughed, and I felt my stomach clench. The poor thing, Jessica continued. She still brings him his lunch every Tuesday like some kind of 1950s housewife. She has absolutely no idea what's about to hit her. Everyone at the office knows about Isabella. Everyone but her. Isabella. The name was like a slap in the face. I kept my breathing even, my eyes fixed on my phone, recording every single word. He's really going through with it? Her friend asked. Oh, 100%. He's been moving assets around for months. By the time she figures out what's happening, there won't be anything left for her to fight over. The Wharton boys always protect their own. They kept talking, but I had heard enough. I paid for my salad, which I hadn't even touched, and walked out. My phone felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket, holding the evidence of my own scheduled demolition. I walked for an hour through the city, the cool September air doing little to calm the storm in my head as the pieces clicked together. The deleted texts, the early meetings with Daniel Lawson, the restructuring documents, and now this Isabella, a person everyone seemed to know about but me. That night, I sent a text to Zoe Chen, my best friend from MIT, who was now a partner at a financial forensics firm. We hadn't talked in over 2 years, but she replied almost instantly, suggesting we meet at a bar in Brooklyn the next night. The place she chose was perfect, a dive bar near the Navy Yard where bankers and their polished wives would never dream of setting foot. Zoe looked exactly the same, her fiery red hair pulled back into the same messy bun she'd worn all through grad school. She gave me a tight hug, then held me at arm's length, studying my face. You look like someone who just found out their house is built on a sinkhole, she said, ordering 2 whiskeys. I told her everything. The documents, the conversation I'd recorded, Ethan's sudden change in behavior, the systematic campaign to erase my contributions to Apex. Zoe listened patiently, nodding every so often as she recognized the familiar patterns. Maya, this isn't just him setting up for a divorce, she said finally, sliding her business card across the scarred wooden table. This is strategic asset stripping. He's not just planning to leave you, he's planning to leave you with absolutely nothing, while making it look like you never contributed a single thing in the first place. She pulled out her tablet and showed me similar cases she'd worked on. Guys like Ethan don't just walk away, she said. They use a scorched earth policy. They destroy everything they leave behind to make sure their story is the only one that survives. Zoe's words haunted me on the long drive home. They destroy what they leave behind. I gripped the steering wheel, pulling into our garage around 11 p.m. I found Ethan passed out on the leather couch in his study, 3 empty Scotch glasses on the table beside him. The planning documents for his Wharton reunion were scattered on his chest, rising and falling with each snore. This was his new Thursday night routine, drinking with his old college buddies over video calls, reliving their glory days and plotting their continued domination of the financial world. I stood in the doorway and watched him for a moment. Even passed out, he radiated entitlement. His mouth was slightly agape, and one hand was still loosely holding his phone. The screen lit up with a new notification. From Isabella. Just her first name in his contacts, no last name needed, as if she were already so intimate that no further identification was necessary. I left him there, grabbed my laptop, and went to the guest bathroom at the far end of the house. It sounds crazy, working from a bathroom, but it was the only room with a lock that wouldn't seem suspicious if Ethan woke up. I put the toilet lid down, set my laptop on top, and sat on the edge of the tub with a legal pad. If I was going to shield myself from the destruction Ethan was planning, I needed to build something stronger than his Wharton network. I needed to become just as invisible as he'd been making me, but with a purpose. My first step was creating the Spectre Group. I had learned all about offshore corporate structuring while helping the Sterlings minimize their tax burden, setting up their shell companies in Delaware and their holding companies in the Cayman Islands. Now I was using that same expertise to protect myself. Each entity I created was designed to look legitimate on paper, with official documentation and registration numbers that would pass any casual inspection. Bermuda for the main holding company, Cayman subsidiaries for the investment arms, and a Delaware LLC to act as the interface with U.S. operations. By 3 a.m., I controlled a web of 7 interconnected companies that existed only as legal documents and on encrypted servers, all under my command through passwords Ethan would never, ever guess. The chance to weaponize this new structure came much faster than I expected. That Sunday, we were at the Sterling estate for dinner when Ethan's father started complaining about the mortgage rates on their property in the Hamptons. "It's highway robbery," Robert Sr. grumbled over his second martini. 7% on a jumbo loan, even with our credit score. These banks have no respect anymore. I looked up from the salmon I was barely eating, an idea forming in my mind with perfect clarity. You know, some of my old MIT alumni started an investment fund. They're looking for stable, low-risk opportunities, things like real estate-backed loans to established families. Eleanor's eyebrows shot up slightly. It was the first time she had shown even a flicker of interest in anything I'd said in months. Really? What kind of terms are they offering? Much better than the banks. Maybe 4.5% with flexible payment schedules. They prefer to work with people they can trust. I kept my voice casual as I took another bite of salmon. I could make an introduction if you'd like. Within a week, I was in the middle of orchestrating the deal of a lifetime. The investment partners I invented had impressive, fabricated backgrounds pieced together from LinkedIn profiles and Wharton alumni directories. I created email addresses, set up burner phones with dedicated numbers, and even had a friend from MIT pose as one of the partners for a brief phone call with the Sterling's lawyer. The loan documentation was flawless. Hundreds of pages of standard legal language that any attorney would recognize. But buried deep within subsection 47C was a single paragraph about acceleration clauses linked to material changes in the family relationships of the primary borrower. The Sterling's lawyer, a golf buddy of Robert Sr., who was more interested in his fee than in due diligence, skimmed right over it during a rushed Friday afternoon review. "It's standard stuff," he told Robert Sr. "Actually, the terms are better than what I usually see." The $18 million refinancing went through the following week. The Sterlings celebrated their financial savvy at dinner, toasting their own shrewd negotiating skills. I just smiled quietly, knowing they had just handed me a loaded gun that could obliterate their financial world with 7 minutes' notice. But their property was just the start. The real prize was Apex Dynamics itself. During the company's scheduled maintenance windows, when the trading systems were offline for updates, I began the delicate process of fragmenting the Oracle engine. It was like performing surgery on my own creation, carefully separating components that were designed to function as a single, integrated whole. The genius of the plan was in how I structured it. Each piece I separated was disguised as a routine update or a necessary patch, things Ethan had to sign off on as part of normal operations. He'd scribble his signature on the authorization forms I put on his desk without a second glance, usually while he was on the phone or looking at portfolios. Just technical stuff, he'd mumble, already thinking about his next meeting. What he was actually signing were licensing agreements between Apex Dynamics and various subsidiaries of the Spectre Group. The neural network components were licensed from one of my entities, the predictive modeling from another, the data processing protocols from a third. On their own, these agreements looked like standard vendor contracts, but together they meant that Apex Dynamics no longer owned the very technology that made it profitable. They were now renting their own brain from me, and the rental agreement included some very specific terms about what would happen if payments were missed or if the contracts were breached. The final piece of the puzzle involved Ethan's sisters. Chloe and Olivia had always treated me like hired help, but they were more than happy to accept my assistance when it came to their trust funds. During one of our family dinners, they were complaining about the tax implications of their distributions, and I offered to help them restructure their trusts for better efficiency. "You know about this stuff?" Chloe asked, her surprise bordering on insulting. "I've picked up a few things," I said modestly, not bothering to mention that my doctorate included extensive coursework in financial modeling. The restructuring I proposed was brilliant on paper. Better tax treatment, higher yields, more flexible access to their money. What they didn't notice was that their father had to sign as a guarantor for certain obligations that were intrinsically linked to his new property loans through a complex web of cross-default provisions. If one domino fell, they would all fall. "You're so sweet to help us," Olivia said, giving me an air kiss on the cheek after she signed the papers, especially considering your background. My background. As if growing up middle class in Ohio was some kind of disease I needed to apologize for. I just smiled and accepted their condescending gratitude, knowing that their signatures had just completed the financial architecture that would bring their entire world crashing down the moment I decided to pull the trigger. By the time I finished building my avalanche, it was completely invisible, but woven into every aspect of their financial lives, like a virus lying dormant, just waiting for the command to activate. 3 weeks had passed since I finished setting up the financial architecture of my revenge, and the weight of carrying this massive secret was starting to wear me down. That's when my mom called to say she was coming to visit. She'd booked her flight without even asking, just announcing that she'd be staying for the weekend. When I told Ethan, he rolled his eyes and muttered something about having to endure Ohio wisdom when he had important networking to do. My mom arrived on a Friday afternoon while Ethan was still at the office. When I opened the door, she took one long look at me and pulled me into a hug that went on for much longer than usual. She felt thinner than I remembered, but her arms were still strong, still able to hold me together when I felt like I was about to fall apart. She didn't say a word about the house, the expensive furniture, or any of the other status symbols Ethan insisted on displaying. She just looked at my face with those sharp brown eyes that had always been able to see right through me. "You've lost weight," she said, setting her old duffel bag down in our marble-floored foyer. "I've just been busy," I replied, leading her into the kitchen. We made small talk while I prepared some tea, chatting about her book club and her neighbor's new grandchild. But when Ethan's BMW pulled into the driveway earlier than I expected, I felt my entire body go rigid. My mom noticed it instantly, the way I straightened my spine, the way my hands automatically went to smooth my hair, the quick glance I gave my reflection in the microwave door. Ethan breezed in, gave my mom a perfunctory peck on the cheek that barely made contact, and announced that he had a golf weekend planned with some clients. He'd be leaving early Saturday morning and wouldn't be back until Sunday night. The wave of relief that washed over me must have been visible on my face, because as soon as his car was out of sight, my mom reached across the counter and squeezed my hand. The next morning, after Ethan had left at dawn for his golf outing, my mom made scrambled eggs and toast while I sat at the kitchen table in my pajamas for the first time in years. The morning sun was streaming through the windows, and for a moment it felt like I was back in our old kitchen in Ohio, before Ethan, before Apex, before I learned how to make myself small. "How long has he been this cruel?" my mom asked suddenly, her back still to me as she plated the eggs. The question caught me completely off guard, and I felt tears well up in my eyes before I could stop them. "I don't know what you mean." She turned to face me, her expression soft but unyielding. "Sweetheart, I watched you flinch when you heard his car yesterday. You checked your appearance 3 times before he walked in the door. You apologized for the brand of tea in your own home. So I'm going to ask you again. How long?" The dam broke. I told her everything, the words pouring out of me in choked sobs, the systematic erasure from Apex, the Wharton Boys Club that had pushed me out, the overheard conversation about Isabella, the divorce plans I had discovered. My mom listened without a word, just pushing a box of tissues across the table and squeezing my hand every so often. When I finally finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Your father had a first wife," she said finally, "before me." She waited too long to leave. She kept thinking things would get better, that he would change. By the time she finally got out, she had lost everything, not just her money, but herself. She stood up and pulled me to my feet. "Come on, we're packing you a go bag, just in case." We spent the rest of the afternoon filling a small suitcase with essentials: clothes, copies of the important documents I'd been collecting, and cash I'd been slowly withdrawing in small increments. My mom helped me hide it in the basement storage room, behind some old skiing equipment that Ethan never touched. "When you're ready to leave," she said, "you call me. Day or night, I'll be there." The Tuesday after my mom left, I was working from home when the doorbell rang. It was a delivery driver with an enormous bouquet of peonies, the soft pink and white kind that must have cost a fortune. I had mentioned once, years ago, that peonies were my least favorite flower. They always seemed too gaudy and over the top to me, but apparently someone else loved them. The card was small and cream-colored with elegant gold edges. "Can't wait for your freedom. E." My hands trembled as I brought the bouquet inside. This wasn't for me. The driver must have made a mistake. Or maybe this was exactly the mistake I needed to see. I found the florist's card and called them, forcing a cheerful tone into my voice. "Hi, I just received a beautiful bouquet, but I wanted to make sure the standing order is correct for next week." "Oh yes, Mrs. Sterling," the florist chirped. "Mr. Sterling's weekly arrangement for Ms. Isabella Vance. Should we continue delivering to the Four Seasons downtown, penthouse suite 1247? "That's perfect," I managed to say. "Same time, every Tuesday at 2 p.m., as usual. He's been so consistent for the past 6 months. Ms. Vance is a lucky woman to have such a devoted friend." 6 months. While I was desperately trying to save our marriage, he was sending another woman flowers every single week to the hotel where he supposedly had all those client meetings. Penthouse Suite 1247. I wrote it down with a steady hand, even though inside I was screaming. 2 weeks later, Ethan insisted that I go with him to the Wharton alumni dinner. "We need to present a united front," he said, completely oblivious to the irony. He parked me at the wives' table in a corner while he held court with potential investors near the bar. I sat between a plastic surgeon's third wife and a hedge fund manager's girlfriend, who couldn't have been older than 22. They were deep in a conversation about vacation homes, while I just pushed a piece of salmon around my plate. Then I heard Ethan's voice carrying across the room. Someone had asked him about Apex's algorithm, and Ethan was explaining my work, down to the specific mathematical models I had developed for my doctorate. He was even using the exact phrases I had used in our early morning discussions years ago, back when we were still partners in more than just name. I forced myself to smile and nod when the plastic surgeon's wife asked if I was proud of my husband's success. Across the room, I caught the eye of Thomas Morrison, my old MIT professor who had been an advisor on my dissertation. He was standing near the bar, and the look he gave me was one of pure, unadulterated understanding. He knew exactly whose work Ethan was describing. He gave me a slight raise of his water glass, a silent toast to the truth that we both knew but couldn't speak in a room full of Ethan's allies. The next day, I drove to the storage unit I had rented under one of the Spectre Group's LLCs. Inside, I had set up a command center of sorts. The walls were lined with bankers' boxes, each one meticulously labeled, containing different pieces of my evidence. There were financial documents showing the systematic removal of my name from patents and contracts, printed emails between Ethan and his lawyer discussing the cleanest exit strategy, the audio recording from the cafe where Jessica had laughed about my ignorance. I spent hours setting up the automated triggers that would execute everything at once. The moment they were activated, each envelope was prepared, sealed, and labeled. One was for the SEC, containing evidence of Ethan's misrepresentation of his company's assets to investors. Another was for Robert Sr., his new mortgage company with the acceleration notice. A third was for the financial aid offices at Yale and Brown, freezing Chloe and Olivia's trust funds. And one special envelope was for Ethan, containing just 7 lines of text that would spell out exactly how his entire empire was dependent on systems he had never bothered to understand. I locked up the storage unit and drove home, the sealed black envelope tucked safely inside my laptop bag. Tonight was my 32nd birthday, though Ethan hadn't mentioned it once all morning. Instead, he had reminded me twice about our dinner reservation at Cipriani's, insisting that I be ready by 7 o'clock sharp. The pretense of a celebration, while he was secretly planning my public execution, would have been laughable if it weren't so damn cruel. When I got home at 4:30, Ethan was already there, standing in our bedroom with 3 dresses laid out on the bed. His presence in my closet, handling my clothes, felt like a violation. He held up a red cocktail dress I'd worn to last year's company Christmas party, studying it with the critical eye of someone staging a performance. "Wear something sophisticated tonight," he said, not looking at me. "Not that black thing you always wear. There will be important people there." I picked up the simple black sheath dress from my side of the closet, the one he had just dismissed. It was elegant in its simplicity, a dress I had bought with my own money before we were married, from a time when I dressed for myself, not for his approval. "I think I'll wear this one." He turned to face me, his jaw tightening in that way it always did when I defied him, even in the smallest of ways. "Maya, I just said—" "It's my birthday dinner, isn't it?" I interrupted, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I should wear what makes me comfortable." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise? Maybe a hint of recalculation. He hadn't expected me to push back, not tonight, not when he thought I was walking blindly into his trap. He just shrugged and turned back to his side of the closet, pulling out his navy Armani suit. I sat at my vanity, applying my makeup while he dressed, watching him in the mirror as he fastened his cufflinks. They were new, platinum with small sapphires that caught the light. I'd never seen them before, but I recognized the distinctive jewelry box on his dresser. It was from Cartier, the same store where Isabella Vance had posted Instagram photos just last month. Though Ethan didn't know I'd looked her up after the peony incident. "Those are beautiful cufflinks," I said, my hand steady as I applied my mascara. "Are they new?" "A gift from a client," he replied, a little too quickly, not meeting my eyes in the mirror, "for closing the Patterson deal." The Patterson deal had closed 3 months ago, but I didn't call him on it. Instead, I reached into my laptop bag and transferred the black envelope to my evening clutch, feeling its weight like a loaded weapon. The automated triggers were all set to activate at exactly 8:47 p.m., synchronized to execute the moment I handed him that envelope. 7 minutes from that moment, his entire world would begin to implode. The drive to Cipriani's took 20 minutes through the evening traffic. Ethan was on his phone the whole time, texting furiously. I watched the city lights blur past the window. At one point, he chuckled at something on his screen, and I caught a glimpse of Jessica's name before he angled the phone away from me. They were probably coordinating the final details of my public humiliation. Cipriani's was on the top floor of a boutique hotel in the Seaport District, its private dining room a masterpiece of calculated luxury. As the elevator doors opened, I could already hear the sounds of laughter and conversation from behind the frosted glass doors. Ethan placed a hand on the small of my back, guiding me forward like a lamb to the slaughter. The room was packed with 40 guests, and my stomach twisted as I recognized their faces. Every single person was from Ethan's world. His Wharton buddies, his partners from Apex, their wives and girlfriends who all belonged to the same exclusive clubs and vacationed in the same elite circles. Not one of my friends was there, not even an acquaintance from my MIT alumni network. This wasn't a birthday party. It was a carefully curated audience for Ethan's grand performance. The seating arrangement told me everything I needed to know. Ethan's place card was at the head of the long table, a position of command. Mine was at the far end, isolated like an afterthought. But the real gut punch was the place card to Ethan's right, Isabella Vance, printed in the same elegant calligraphy as all the others. She was already there, wearing a stark white dress that made her blonde hair shine, laughing at something Daniel Lawson was saying. She looked up as we walked in, and her eyes met mine for a split second before she quickly looked away. "Happy birthday, Maya," Eleanor Sterling said, air kissing my cheek with lips that barely moved. Her smile was the kind you give someone at a funeral, full of pity and uncomfortable obligation. I took my seat at the far end of the table, surrounded by the younger wives who immediately launched into a discussion about their Pilates instructors. The champagne was already flowing, our glasses constantly being refilled by attentive waiters. I noticed how people kept glancing at me, then quickly looking away when I caught their eye. Jessica actually smirked at me from across the room, raising her glass in a mock toast. The dinner was a painfully predictable affair. 7 courses of elaborate food that I couldn't taste, paired with wines that Ethan had chosen specifically to impress his audience. He held court at his end of the table, telling stories about his deals and conquests, while Isabella periodically touched his arm and laughed at all the right moments. By the time dessert arrived, an elaborate chocolate lava cake with a single sad-looking candle. The room was buzzing with anticipation. Ethan stood up, tapping his crystal glass with a silver spoon. The chatter died down instantly. All eyes turned to him as he commanded the room's attention. He looked confident, powerful, every inch the successful man he had always pretended to be. His smile was the coldest thing I had ever seen. "Before we toast to Maya's birthday," he began, his voice taking on that particular tone of someone about to deliver a punchline, "I have an announcement to make." The room held its breath. I could feel 40 pairs of eyes shifting between Ethan and me, waiting for the axe to fall. "A toast to the loser," he said, looking directly at me. "We're done." The laughter erupted like a shaken bottle of champagne, loud and effervescent. His Wharton buddies raised their glasses, cheering like they had just watched a winning play. The wives tittered behind their manicured hands, and Isabella actually applauded, her white dress making her look like a bride at her own rehearsal dinner. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't give them the satisfaction of the breakdown they had all come to see. Instead, I reached into my clutch, pulled out the black envelope, and stood up. I walked the length of the table with measured, deliberate steps. The laughter started to fade as they watched me approach Ethan, their expressions shifting to confusion. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected complete and utter composure. I slid the envelope across the marble tabletop toward him. My voice was perfectly steady when I spoke. "Before you celebrate, you should probably explain to your sisters why their college funds are gone. To your parents, why their home and luxury cars will be seized in a matter of minutes. And to your business partners, why the firm is dead before the check arrives." The silence was absolute. Ethan's triumphant smile faltered as he looked down at the envelope, then back up at me. His hand hesitated before he picked it up, and I saw the first crack appear in his armor of arrogance. "Enjoy the cake," I said, turning and walking toward the door. "You have about 7 minutes." Behind me, I heard the sound of paper tearing as he ripped open the envelope. I was already at the elevator when the first phone started to buzz, then another, and then dozens more, as the automated triggers I had programmed began their synchronized campaign of destruction. The elevator doors closed on the sound of Robert Sterling Sr., his voice shouting something about his lawyer. I walked through the lobby of Cipriani's and out into the cool night air. My heels clicked on the pavement as I made my way to my Tesla, parked across the street. Inside, I opened my laptop and watched as the dashboards I had configured lit up with confirmation messages. The loan acceleration notices had been sent. The system lockdowns were in effect. The trust funds were frozen. Every domino was falling exactly as I had planned. Through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the chaos erupting in the private dining room. Ethan was frantically rereading the letter in the envelope while his father pushed through the crowd toward the balcony, his phone already pressed to his ear. Through my Tesla's windshield, I watched Robert Sr. pace back and forth, his free arm waving wildly as he yelled at whoever was unfortunate enough to be on the other end of his call. Eleanor had knocked over an entire tray of champagne glasses in her rush to get to her phone, the crystal shattering across the marble floor like scattered diamonds. The sound must have been deafening, though I couldn't hear it from where I was parked. I started the car and drove to my brownstone in Brooklyn, the one I had purchased through a Spectre Group subsidiary 14 months earlier. Ethan never knew about this place. He thought I spent my occasional nights away at my mother's apartment or in budget hotels when I claimed I needed space. The 3-story building was on a quiet, tree-lined street in Park Slope, far enough from Manhattan's financial district that no one from Ethan's circle would ever stumble upon it. This was my sanctuary, furnished simply but comfortably with pieces I had chosen myself, paid for with consulting fees I had earned by reviewing code for startups under a pseudonym. Once inside, I set my laptop on the kitchen table and pulled up the monitoring dashboard. My phone already had 47 missed calls, but I just switched it to silent and placed it face down on the counter. The real story was unfolding on my screen, in real-time data streams and system logs that painted a picture of a complete and total operational collapse. Apex Dynamics' primary trading platform had gone dark at exactly 8:54 p.m., 7 minutes after I handed Ethan the envelope. The backup systems had tried to engage but found themselves locked behind biometric authentication that they couldn't bypass. The client portals were displaying error messages in randomly cycling languages, from Mandarin to Swedish to Arabic. A small personal touch I had added just because I could. Daniel Lawson was sending increasingly frantic emails to the development team, each one more desperate than the last, demanding to know why he had no administrative access to the systems he supposedly controlled. Zoe sent me encrypted updates every few hours. The Sterling estate in the Hamptons had received a notice of immediate loan acceleration. The mortgage company was initiating foreclosure proceedings that would put the property in receivership within 10 days, unless $17 million materialized out of thin air. The financial aid offices at Yale and Brown had frozen Chloe and Olivia's accounts after their trust fund payments were reversed. Both sisters were now locked out of their student portals, unable to access their grades, transcripts, or even their university email accounts. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my living room, surrounded by the blessed silence of a space that was entirely mine. There was no performing, no pretending, no walking on eggshells, wondering what mood Ethan would bring home. The irony wasn't lost on me that in destroying their world, I had finally found peace in my own. For 3 days, I maintained that silence, watching their empire crumble through data points and system failures while ignoring the increasingly desperate voicemails that flooded my phone. On the morning of the 4th day, my doorbell rang at 6:43 a.m. Through the security camera I had installed, I saw Ethan standing on my brownstone steps. He looked like a completely different person from the man who had stood so triumphantly at Cipriani's just 72 hours earlier. His Armani suit was wrinkled and stained, the same one he had worn to the party. His Wharton class ring was gone, probably pawned for some quick cash. The designer stubble he so carefully maintained had grown into a patchy, unkempt beard, and his eyes had the hollowed-out look of someone who hadn't slept in days. I opened the door but didn't invite him in, letting him stand on the step while I stood in the doorway, my coffee mug in hand. The morning air was crisp, and I noticed him shiver slightly in his thin, wrinkled suit jacket. "Please," he said, and the words seemed to physically pain him. It came out cracked and foreign, as if his mouth had never formed those syllables before. This man who had commanded boardrooms and dominated conversations couldn't even meet my eyes as he stood on my doorstep like a beggar. "Please, what, Ethan?" I asked, taking a sip of my coffee. "The company is gone. Everything is frozen. My parents are losing their house. Chloe and Olivia can't graduate. The SEC is investigating me personally for misrepresenting technological assets to investors." His voice broke on the last word. "Just tell me what you want. Tell me how to fix this." "You can't fix this," I replied simply. "You can only live with the consequences of your choices, just like you expected me to live with mine." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a crumpled envelope. "My lawyer said to give you this." The letterhead from a prestigious law firm was impressive, as was the thickness of the packet. It was 23 pages of legal threats claiming extortion, theft of trade secrets, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and a variety of other creative interpretations of criminal law. I smiled as I flipped through it, recognizing the desperate language of attorneys who know they have no case but need to justify their retainer. "You should go," I told him, starting to close the door. "This isn't over," he said, a spark of his old arrogance returning. "My lawyers will destroy you." That afternoon, I forwarded the entire packet to Anika Sharma, my attorney at Blackstone Legal. Anika was brilliant, ruthless, and had been preparing for this exact scenario for months. Within 2 hours, she had crafted a response that included documentation, proving I owned every single line of code that Apex Dynamics relied on. She attached the audio recording from the cafe where Jessica had discussed Ethan's plan to cut me out completely. She included the emails between Ethan and Daniel Lawson planning my termination. Every threat his lawyers had made was now evidence of Ethan's attempted theft of my intellectual property. 2 days later, my doorbell rang again. This time, the security camera showed Isabella Vance standing on my steps. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. Gone was the white dress and perfect makeup from Cipriani's. She looked younger, more vulnerable, and surprisingly nervous. I opened the door, but again, I didn't invite her in. "I'm not here for Ethan," she said quickly. "I'm here because I've been gathering evidence of his fraudulent dealings with my clients' portfolios. He's been using my position at Goldman to get insider information." She held out a flash drive. "Everything is on here. Trade records, emails, recorded conversations where he explicitly talks about using material, non-public information." I studied her for a moment. "Why would you give this to me?" "Because he destroyed my career the same way he tried to destroy yours. The only difference is, you saw it coming and fought back." She paused. "I thought maybe we could work together." I took the flash drive but shook my head. "I appreciate this, but I don't need an alliance. I have everything I need to make sure Ethan faces the consequences he deserves." I reached into my pocket and handed her a business card. "This is the SEC investigator who has been calling me. I'm sure he'd be very interested in what you have on that drive." Isabella took the card, nodded once, and walked away. I closed the door and went back to my laptop, where another dozen system alerts confirmed that Ethan's world was continuing its methodical collapse. The unraveling was complete, and I hadn't even had to leave my brownstone to watch it happen. I closed the door on Isabella and returned to my laptop where an email marked urgent from Anika Sharma was waiting. The Apex Dynamics board had called an emergency meeting for 9 o'clock the next morning. They wanted to discuss the technological crisis, and their frantic investigation had revealed that all roads led back to the Spectre Group. Anika had already informed them that I would be attending, not as Ethan's estranged wife, but as the controlling owner of their entire technical infrastructure. The next morning, I dressed in a navy suit I had bought specifically for this moment. It wasn't a designer label, it wasn't flashy, it was just professionally elegant, in a way that screamed I meant business. The Apex Dynamics offices were on the 32nd floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, the same building where I had once served coffee to investors who looked right through me. This time, when I walked through those glass doors, the receptionist's eyes widened with a mix of recognition and confusion. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. 7 board members were seated around the polished mahogany table, including Ethan, who looked like he had aged a decade in the past week. Daniel Lawson was there, his Wharton MBA proving useless in the face of actual technical complexity. Robert Sterling Sr. was in his usual seat. despite the fact that he could no longer afford the parking fee for the building. I didn't take the chair they had set for me at the far end of the table. Instead, I walked to the head of the room, connected my laptop to the presentation screen, and brought up my first slide. It showed the complete ownership structure of the Oracle engine. "Gentlemen," I began, noticing how they flinched at my formal tone. "You called this meeting to discuss your technological crisis. Let me clarify your position. Every line of code that Apex Dynamics depends on belongs to the Spectre Group, which is wholly owned by me. The licensing agreements you were operating under expired the moment Ethan publicly announced our divorce, triggering the morality clause in subsection 12. I clicked to the next slide, which showed the patent filings, all dated and registered under my maiden name, Maya Brooks, years before Apex Dynamics even existed. I created the Oracle engine during my doctoral work at MIT. The patents were filed under my maiden name, which is why your due diligence never found them. A board member named Marcus Webb, a silver-haired venture capitalist who had always been the most pragmatic of the group, leaned forward. "What do you want?" I smiled and advanced to the next slide. "You have two options. Option 1. You recognize me as the founder and majority owner of Apex Dynamics, with 70% equity based on the valuation of the intellectual property I created. Ethan will retain 5%, and the board can split the remaining 25%. Option 2. I sell everything to Titan Investments for pennies on the dollar, and you can explain to your investors why their portfolios are now worthless." "This is extortion," Ethan spat, finding his voice for the first time. "No," I replied calmly. "This is capitalism. I own something you need, and I'm offering to sell it to you at a fair price. The fact that you never bothered to secure ownership of your own company's fundamental technology is not my problem to solve." The board members exchanged glances. They were trapped, and everyone in that room knew it. Without the Oracle engine, Apex Dynamics was just another investment firm with a nice office and no competitive advantage. "We need time to discuss this," Webb said carefully. "You have 1 hour," I replied, closing my laptop. "My attorney is waiting in the lobby with the contracts. I'd decide quickly. Titan Investments is very eager to acquire these assets. I spent that hour in a coffee shop across the street, watching through the window as a stream of messengers arrived at the building, likely lawyers and advisors being summoned for an emergency consultation. When I returned, the contracts were signed. I was now the majority owner of the company I had built from the ground up. 3 days later, the Wall Street Journal published its investigation. The headline stretched across the front page of the business section: "The Ghost in the Machine, the genius who built and rebuilt Apex Dynamics." The reporter, Susan Chin, had done her homework. She had interviewed Professor Morrison from MIT, who confirmed that I was the sole creator of the Oracle engine. She had spoken with former employees who remembered me coding through the night while Ethan was at networking events. The timeline was devastating, showing how each of Apex's major successes corresponded directly with an improvement I had made to the algorithm, while my systematic erasure from the company records coincided with Ethan bringing in his Wharton network. The article featured a photo from my MIT graduation, showing me standing next to my doctoral advisor beside a presentation board that displayed the early framework of the Oracle engine. Next to it was a recent photo of Ethan at an industry conference, presenting my work as his own. The contrast was damning. My phone buzzed with interview requests from CNBC, Bloomberg, and Forbes, but I declined them all. The truth was out, and I had more important work to do. I scheduled a meeting with Titan Investments, not as a desperate seller, but as a woman with assets to leverage. We met in their conference room overlooking Central Park, the same room where Ethan had once pitched them on a partnership they had ultimately declined. $40 million for the complete Oracle engine, I stated simply. A non-exclusive license with a 5-year non-compete clause for the financial sector. They agreed in under 10 minutes. The wire transfer was confirmed by lunch. That afternoon, I signed the lease for the new offices of Vanguard Analytics, 6 floors below where Apex Dynamics was beginning its death spiral. I had already recruited my team, Dr. Sarah Okoro, who had been passed over for promotion at the Federal Reserve 3 times despite her groundbreaking work in monetary policy modeling, Jessica Martinez, whose revolutionary risk assessment algorithms had been credited to her male supervisor at Goldman Sachs, and Amy Patterson, a coder whose innovations in high-frequency trading had made millions for firms that refused to promote her beyond a junior developer role. As we stood in our new offices, looking out at the city skyline, Sarah raised her coffee mug in a toast to the overlooked and the underestimated. While we were celebrating our new beginning, Ethan was facing his end. The SEC investigation, bolstered by Isabella's evidence, had uncovered years of misrepresentation to investors and clear proof of insider trading. His Wharton partners publicly distanced themselves, claiming they had been deceived about the technology's origins. Daniel Lawson resigned and went back to consulting. The investors pulled their funds en masse, and within 2 weeks, Apex Dynamics existed only on paper. Robert Sterling Sr. filed for bankruptcy on a Tuesday. The Hamptons estate was sold at auction to cover their debts. Eleanor moved in with her sister in Parsippany, her social standing completely destroyed. Chloe and Olivia transferred to state schools, taking jobs at department stores to pay the rent on the small apartment they now shared. The Sterling dynasty, built on borrowed brilliance and stolen innovation, had crumbled into dust. My mother arrived the following week, taking the train from Ohio because she said she wanted to see everything properly. When she walked into the offices of Vanguard Analytics and saw my name on the door, CEO and founder, she stopped and touched the lettering with a trembling hand. "You didn't just survive, baby," she said, her fingers still on the glass. "You soared." She turned to me with tears streaming down her face, and I realized I was crying too. Not from sadness or anger, but from something I hadn't felt in years. Pure, uncomplicated pride in what I had built with my own hands and my own mind. We stood in the reception area of Vanguard Analytics as my team prepared for our first major client presentation. The energy in the office was electric, nothing like the suffocating atmosphere at Apex, where everyone performed for Ethan's approval. Here, Sarah was explaining her monetary policy model to Jessica, who was incorporating it into her risk assessment framework. Amy had 3 monitors filled with code that would revolutionize how we processed market data. We were collaborating, building on each other's ideas, creating something far greater than the sum of its parts. The client presentation was a resounding success. Hartman Industries signed a 3-year contract worth $2 million a year, specifically citing their confidence in working with the actual creator of the Oracle engine, rather than someone who had merely taken credit for it. By the end of our first month, Vanguard Analytics returns had exceeded Apex's best quarter by 30%. We weren't just succeeding, we were setting new industry standards. Word spread quickly through the financial world. 3 more brilliant women reached out to me, each with a story that was painfully similar to my own. Dr. Lisa Chong, whose quantitative models had generated millions for her previous firm while she remained stuck in middle management. Rebecca Torres, a Harvard MBA, whose strategic innovations were consistently presented by her male colleagues as their own ideas. And Maria Petrov, a coding genius who had built entire trading platforms while being paid half of what her junior male counterparts earned. I hired them all. Our office expanded to fill the entire floor, and the atmosphere was unlike anything I had ever experienced in corporate America. We shared ideas openly, credited each other's contributions meticulously, and celebrated our successes as a team. There was no hierarchy of whose voice mattered more, no performance of authority, just brilliant minds working together toward a common goal. 6 months after Vanguard's launch, I attended the Financial Innovation Conference in Chicago, not as someone's +1 or as administrative support, but as a keynote speaker. The organizers had specifically requested that I present on the future of algorithmic trading. I was standing backstage, adjusting my microphone, wearing a simple black dress I had chosen myself, when I saw him across the convention floor. Ethan was manning a small booth for a third-tier firm that mostly handled municipal bonds. His Tom Ford suits had been replaced with an off-the-rack polyester one that pulled slightly at the shoulders. The Wharton class ring was still gone, and his hair was starting to thin in a way that expensive treatments could no longer hide. He was desperately trying to explain something to a potential client who looked thoroughly unimpressed, trying to project an authority he no longer possessed. Our eyes met across the crowded room. For a split second, time seemed to stand still. I saw recognition flash across his face, followed immediately by an emotion I never thought I would see from Ethan Sterling: shame. He was the one to look away first, turning his back to me as if he were suddenly fascinated by the display materials behind him. The man who had called me a failure in front of 40 people couldn't even look at the woman who had rebuilt herself from the ashes of his betrayal. I delivered my keynote address to a standing ovation. The audience of 500 industry professionals listened as I explained the next evolution of algorithmic trading, innovations that went far beyond what the Oracle engine had ever accomplished. During the QA session, someone asked about my journey from MIT to founding Vanguard Analytics. I told the truth, simply and without bitterness, about how being erased from my own creation had taught me the importance of ownership, documentation, and never allowing anyone to diminish your contributions. After the conference, I used $10 million from the Titan investment sale to establish the Nemesis Foundation. The name was deliberate, a reminder that sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected places. The foundation would provide funding, mentorship, and legal support for women whose technological contributions had been stolen, erased, or appropriated. Professor Thomas Morrison from MIT agreed to serve on the board, helping to identify candidates whose brilliance was being systematically overlooked. Our first grant went to a programmer in Seattle whose machine learning innovations had been patented under her supervisor's name. The second went to a team of 3 women whose startup had been destroyed by a hostile takeover that claimed their technology as pre-existing intellectual property. Within 6 months, we were supporting 27 women across the country, each one of them building something extraordinary from the ruins of what had been taken from them. One evening, as I stood in my office overlooking the Hudson River, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I knew instantly it was Ethan. He must have gotten a new phone after his old one was disconnected for non-payment. The message was short: "You destroyed everything." I took a picture of Vanguard Analytics' latest achievement, our feature in Forbes as one of the top 10 most innovative financial firms in America, and sent it as my reply. Then I deleted his number and blocked it, feeling the last thread connecting us finally snap. He was right in a way. I had destroyed everything. Everything that was built on lies, theft, and the systematic erasure of my work. But from that destruction, I had built something infinitely better. I called my mother, who answered on the first ring, as always. "Mom, I've been looking at apartments near me. There's a beautiful 2-bedroom in my building with a view of the river. It has a reading nook that would be perfect for your book club meetings." Her sharp intake of breath told me everything. "Maya, I couldn't possibly afford." "Mom, I can afford it. We can afford it. You supported me through everything. Let me give something back to you." As she cried happy tears on the other end of the line, I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. The woman staring back at me wasn't the invisible wife who served coffee, while others took credit for her work. She wasn't the victim who had been publicly humiliated at her own birthday dinner. She was someone who had taken the worst moment of her life and transformed it into the foundation for something extraordinary. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't just reclaiming what was stolen or watching those who wronged you fall. It was building something so magnificent that their betrayal becomes nothing more than a footnote in your own success story. Ethan thought he was ending my story that night at Cipriani's. Instead, he had set me free to write a much better one, surrounded by brilliant women who understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to remain invisible. My phone buzzed with emails from potential clients, partnership offers, and interview requests. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to grow Vanguard Analytics into something even greater. But for tonight, I just stood in my office, watching the lights of the city twinkle below, finally at peace with the journey that had brought me here. End of story.